You plug your phone in, you expect that familiar jump on the screen, the little lightning bolt, the words fast charging or super fast charging, lighting up like a promise being kept, but nothing happens. The percentage creeps up one digit every few minutes, like your phone forgot what it's capable of. You check the cable, you check the wall socket, you restart it, still nothing. If this is happening to you right now, you are not dealing with a broken phone. In almost every single case, you are dealing with one of 8 very specific, very fixable problems. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly which one is yours and exactly how to solve it, step by step, using the same checks Samsung's own support team uses internally. Let's start with the most basic truth that almost nobody explains properly. Fast charging on a Samsung device is not just about plugging in any charger and hoping for the best. It is a negotiation. Your phone, your cable, and your charging adapter all have to agree on a shared standard before that higher wattage is allowed to flow. If even one of those 3 components doesn't support the right protocol, the whole system quietly drops down to a slow, basic charging speed, and your phone won't necessarily tell you why. It just charges slowly and leaves you guessing. So before we touch any settings menu, we need to understand what's actually happening inside that connection, because almost every fix you're about to see comes back to this one idea. The very first thing you should check, and this surprises a lot of people, is your charger itself. Starting with the Galaxy S25 and continuing into the Galaxy S26 lineup, Samsung stopped including a wall adapter in the box. You only get a USB-C cable. That means a huge number of fast charging not working complaints aren't actually faults at all. They're simply people using an old charger left over from a previous phone, a generic adapter that came with a tablet, or whatever charging brick happened to be sitting in a drawer. If that adapter doesn't output enough wattage, your phone has no choice but to charge slowly, and it will do this silently, without any error message warning you that you're leaving speed on the table. This is where the specifics actually matter, because not every Samsung phone charges at the same speed, and using the wrong assumption here wastes a lot of people's time. The base Galaxy S26 tops out at 25 watts of super fast charging, so a 25-watt Samsung adapter gets you full speed on that model, no more is needed. The Galaxy S26 Plus supports super fast charging 2.0 up to 45 watts. The Galaxy S26 Ultra is the only model in that lineup that reaches 60 watts, and it requires Samsung's dedicated 60-watt superfast charger, which, again, is sold completely separately from the phone. If you own a base model or the Plus version, and you go out and buy a 60-watt charger expecting a speed boost, you won't get one, because your phone is built to cap itself at the wattage it's designed for. Older flagships like the Galaxy S25 Ultra, along with the Z Fold 7 and Z Flip 7, each have their own maximum wattage too. So the golden rule here is simple. Match the charger to your exact model. Don't assume bigger numbers always mean a bigger boost. And when in doubt, use the official Samsung charger rated for your specific phone. Now here's where it gets a little more interesting, because the charger is only half the equation. The cable matters just as much, and this is the part most people skip entirely. Fast charging cables aren't just thicker wires with a USB-C tip on each end. Properly rated cables contain the internal wiring and chip support needed to handle programmable power supply, often shortened to PPS, which is the protocol Samsung's super fast charging actually depends on. Cheap, generic cables you might grab from a gas station or a random online seller frequently skip this internal hardware entirely to cut costs. The cable will physically plug in just fine, your phone will start charging, but it will quietly default to a basic 5-watt trickle because the cable simply isn't capable of carrying anything faster. If you've been blaming your phone, your charger, or your battery, and the real culprit was a $3 cable sitting in your bag, you wouldn't be the first person this has happened to, and you almost certainly won't be the last. So how do you actually check if your cable is the problem? Look closely at both ends. Frayed insulation, exposed copper wiring, bent or discolored connector pins, or a connector that feels loose and wobbly when it's plugged in, are all signs the cable has failed or is failing. But even a cable that looks perfectly fine on the outside can have damaged internal wiring that's invisible from the surface. The most reliable test is simply swapping it out. Borrow a cable you know is Samsung certified, or one labeled specifically for fast charging at 25 watts or higher, plug it into the same charger and the same phone, and watch what happens. If charging speed jumps back to normal, you've found your answer, and it cost you nothing but a few minutes. Once you've ruled out the cable and the charger, the next stop is the charging port on the phone itself, and this is where things get a little messier, quite literally. Every time you put your phone in your pocket, set it on a table, or toss it in a bag, that little USB-C port at the bottom is collecting dust, lint, and microscopic debris, whether you notice it or not. Over weeks and months, that debris builds up inside the port and starts physically blocking the connection between the cable's pins and the contacts inside your phone. Your phone might still charge, technically, but the connection becomes unstable, intermittent, or simply too weak to support the higher current that fast charging requires. This is one of the most common causes of slow charging on phones that are a year or two old, and it's almost always completely free to fix. Cleaning a charging port properly takes patience, not force. Grab a flashlight and actually look inside the port first. You'd be amazed how often you can visibly see a little gray clump of fuzz sitting right at the entrance. Compressed air, the kind sold for cleaning keyboards, works well when used in short bursts rather than one long blast, which can sometimes push debris deeper instead of out. A soft, dry brush, like the kind used for cleaning small electronics, or even a clean, dry toothbrush with very soft bristles, can gently loosen anything stuck further inside. What you should never do is jab a metal pin, a paperclip, or a toothpick into the port. The contacts inside are extremely thin and easy to bend, and a bent pin can turn a 5-minute cleaning job into a far more expensive repair bill. If, after careful cleaning, the port still feels loose, the cable wobbles around inside it, or charging remains unstable no matter what accessories you try, that's usually a sign of physical wear that goes beyond simple dust. And it might be time to have it inspected professionally rather than risk damaging it further yourself. Now, let's talk about something Samsung built directly into the operating system that catches an enormous number of people off guard, because it doesn't look like a problem at all. It looks like a safety message. If you plug in your phone, and instead of fast charging, you see a notification about moisture being detected in the charging port, your phone isn't malfunctioning, it's protecting itself. Modern Galaxy devices use sensors near the USB-C port specifically to detect liquid, sweat, or condensation, and when moisture is found, the phone deliberately blocks wired charging entirely to prevent a short circuit or corrosion inside the port. This happens more often than people realize, especially after a workout, a humid day, charging right after a shower, or even just stepping out of light rain. The fix here is almost embarrassingly simple, but absolutely critical. Do not force a charger into the port, and do not keep trying repeatedly. Unplug everything. Gently wipe the outside of the port with a dry cloth, and then either let the phone air dry in a well-ventilated space, or gently shake it several times, with the port facing downward to help any trapped moisture work its way out. Most of the time, the port fully clears within 1 to 2 hours. If you genuinely need power during that window, switching to a wireless charging pad, since it doesn't involve the port at all, is a safe temporary workaround while everything dries out properly. With the hardware checks out of the way, it's time to move into the settings menu, because sometimes the simplest explanation really is the right one. Fast charging might just be switched off. This happens more often than you'd think, particularly after a software update resets certain preferences, or after switching battery modes for travel, or simply because a setting got toggled by accident at some point and nobody noticed. To check this on a modern Galaxy device, open Settings, tap Battery and Device Care, then tap Battery, and look for more battery settings near the bottom of that screen. Depending on your exact model and software version, you might see this section worded slightly differently, but you're looking for toggles labeled Fast Charging, Super Fast Charging, and, if you ever charge wirelessly, Fast Wireless Charging as well. Make sure every one of these is switched on. If any of them were off, after turning them back on, unplug your charger completely and plug it back in, because the higher charging rate typically won't kick in until the connection is reestablished from scratch. While you're in that settings menu, there's a feature worth understanding deeply, because it's responsible for more confused "my fast charging stopped working" messages than almost anything else on this list. And it's not actually a malfunction at all. It's called battery protection, and you'll find it by going to Settings, then Battery Protection. Inside, you'll typically see 2 modes, Maximum and Adaptive. Maximum mode deliberately stops charging once your battery hits 80% every single time, regardless of how long the charger stays plugged in. Adaptive mode applies that same 80% cap specifically while you're asleep, based on your usual charging patterns, then allows a full charge to 100% when you're awake and likely to unplug soon. Samsung includes this feature because consistently charging a lithium battery all the way to 100%, especially overnight for 8 hours, accelerates long-term battery wear. It is genuinely good for the lifespan of your phone. But if you didn't know this feature existed, watching your phone stop charging at exactly 80% night after night looks identical to a fast charging failure. If you'd rather have a full charge every time and you understand the long-term trade-off, simply open that menu and switch both maximum and adaptive modes off. Let's talk about heat next, because this is a factor that genuinely surprises people, even though it's been part of how lithium batteries work for years. Fast charging pushes a significantly higher current into your battery than standard charging does, and that extra current generates extra heat as a natural side effect. Samsung's engineers built in temperature safeguards specifically because charging a battery while it's too hot accelerates degradation and, in worst-case scenarios, creates genuine safety risks. So when your phone's internal temperature climbs past a certain threshold, generally somewhere around 40 degrees Celsius, the system automatically throttles charging speed to cool things down, sometimes dropping all the way back to a slow trickle until the temperature comes back under control. This is most likely to happen if you're gaming with the charger plugged in, if you're charging in direct sunlight, if your phone is sitting on a heat-trapping surface like a thick blanket or a leather car seat, or if you're using a thick, insulated phone case that traps heat against the body of the device. The fix is almost entirely about environment. Charge in a cool, shaded, well-ventilated space. Remove a thick case if your phone consistently runs hot, and avoid heavy gaming or video recording sessions, while the phone is plugged in if speed matters to you in that moment. None of this is a flaw in your phone. It's a deliberate, protective design choice, and fighting against it will only wear your battery down faster. Software bugs are next on the list, and they're sneakier because they don't always announce themselves clearly. Your phone runs on a complex operating system that constantly manages battery health, charging curves, and power delivery negotiation behind the scenes. Like any complex software, it occasionally glitches. An outdated version of One UI can contain charging bugs that Samsung has already identified and fixed in a later update, meaning you could be experiencing a problem that's already been solved, you just haven't installed the fix yet. To check, go into Settings, tap Software Update, then tap Download and Install. Let your phone search for anything pending. Install whatever it finds, restart the device fully once the update completes, and then test charging again. Samsung has a documented history of pushing targeted fixes specifically for charging issues. Earlier this year, for example, updates rolled out for several Galaxy S24 models, specifically addressing reports of slow charging behavior, which shows this isn't a rare one-off occurrence. Staying current on software isn't just about new features. It's genuinely one of the more overlooked fixes for inconsistent charging speeds. If updating doesn't help, a simple restart is worth trying before anything more drastic, because it clears out temporary system files and background processes that can interfere with how your phone manages power in the moment. Hold down the power button, or the power and volume down buttons together, depending on your model, select Restart, and give it a full 30 seconds after the screen goes black before plugging back in. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but a restart resets the charging negotiation process from a clean state. And for some software hiccups, the clean restart is genuinely all it takes. Background apps deserve their own mention here too, because they're working against your charging speed in a way you can't always see. Apps running active processes while your phone charges, things like navigation apps tracking your location, streaming apps playing video, or games still rendering graphics, are actively pulling power out of the battery at the exact same time your charger is trying to push power in. The net result is your phone charges far slower than it should, because it's essentially fighting a losing battle against its own power draw. Before you plug in for a quick top-up, close out of recent apps, or at minimum back out of anything actively streaming or rendering, and you'll often see a noticeable speed difference almost immediately. There's also the question of where you're actually plugging your charger in, and this trips up more people than you'd expect. Plugging your charging adapter into a laptop's USB port, a car's USB port, or a power strip shared with several other high-draw devices can all limit the amount of power actually reaching your phone, regardless of how capable your charger and cable are. A laptop's USB port, in particular, is typically designed to output far less power than a dedicated wall socket. So even with the correct cable and adapter combination, you'll see noticeably slower charging speeds. The fix is straightforward. Plug directly into a wall outlet whenever fast charging speed actually matters to you, and treat USB ports on laptops, cars, or shared hubs as backup options for convenience rather than your primary charging method. Now, if you've worked through every single fix so far, the cable, the charger, the port, the settings, the software update, the background apps, the power source, and you're still seeing slow, inconsistent charging, it's time to look at the battery itself, because lithium batteries are consumable components with a finite lifespan, not permanent parts. Every battery is rated for a certain number of full charge cycles, and once a battery has gone through roughly 500 of those cycles, its ability to safely accept high current naturally declines. This is a built-in chemical limitation, not a flaw in your specific phone, and Samsung systems are deliberately conservative about pushing fast charging speeds into a battery that's already showing signs of wear, specifically to avoid safety risks. The good news is you don't have to guess whether this applies to you. Samsung includes a built-in diagnostic tool for exactly this situation. Open the Samsung Members app, which comes pre-installed on virtually every Galaxy device, navigate to the Support tab or the Discover tab, followed by Diagnostics, depending on your region and software version, and tap Phone Diagnostics. From there, run either battery status individually or the full test all option. And within moments, you'll get a clear health reading along with specific next step recommendations based on what the test finds. If that diagnostic comes back showing genuine battery degradation, you're looking at one of two realistic paths forward. The first is simply adjusting your expectations and habits around an aging battery, accepting somewhat slower charging as a natural trade-off, and getting the most out of the phone you already have. The second, if charging speed and battery life genuinely matter enough to you, is a battery replacement, which Samsung offers through authorized service centers, often at a far more reasonable cost than people assume, especially compared to the price of replacing the entire device. Either path is valid, and the diagnostic test removes the guesswork entirely, so you're making that decision based on real data about your specific phone, rather than just a vague feeling that something's off. There's one more software-level option worth knowing about before reaching for a full reset, and it sits in a slightly different part of the settings menu than most people think to look. Some charging inconsistencies stem from app preferences or system caches that have built up over time, separate from the operating system itself. Resetting app preferences, which you can typically find under the three-dot menu in your full app list inside settings, restores default behaviors for things like background activity permissions and notification settings without touching any of your personal files, photos, or data. It's a smaller, far less drastic step than a factory reset, and it occasionally resolves charging quirks tied to a misbehaving app that's interfering more than you'd expect with how your phone manages power in the background. If, after every single one of these checks, charging is still slow, unstable, or simply not happening at the speed your phone is rated for, a factory data reset becomes the next reasonable step, because it wipes away every piece of accumulated software clutter and restores your device to the exact state it was in when it left the factory. This is genuinely effective for deeper firmware level issues that simpler fixes can't reach. But this step comes with one absolutely critical warning that you cannot afford to skip. A factory reset erases everything on your phone, every photo, every message, every app, and its data, with no way to undo it once it's started. Before you even think about going down this road, back up everything. Samsung Cloud, Google's backup tools, or a dedicated backup application on your computer all work, but the method matters less than simply doing it completely before you proceed. Once your backup is confirmed and verified, you can perform the reset through settings, then general management, then reset, then factory data reset, following the on-screen prompts. After the reset completes and your phone walks you through initial setup again, test fast charging immediately before reinstalling all your old apps and restoring your backup, so you can clearly tell whether the reset actually fixed the underlying issue. And if you've genuinely worked through this entire list, the cable, the charger, the wattage match for your specific model, the port cleaning, the moisture check, the settings toggles, battery protection modes, heat and environment, software updates, background apps, the power source itself, the battery health diagnostic, app preference resets, and even a full factory reset, and fast charging is still broken, you are very likely looking at a genuine hardware fault. This could mean a damaged charging port that needs physical repair, a failing battery that's reached the end of its safe, usable life, or in rarer cases, an internal component issue tied to the phone's charging circuitry itself. At this point, the responsible move is booking a service appointment, either at an official Samsung service center or through a certified repair partner, rather than attempting anything more invasive yourself. Opening a modern smartphone without the right tools and experience risks turning a repairable problem into a genuinely broken phone, and the relatively small cost of a professional diagnostic is almost always worth the peace of mind it buys you. Before you go, here's the short version, in case you want to bookmark this and come back to it later. Check your cable for damage and confirm it's rated for fast charging. Match your charger's wattage to your exact phone model, because more watts doesn't always mean more speed if your phone caps out lower. Clean your charging port carefully with compressed air or a soft, dry brush, never anything metal or sharp. Watch for moisture warnings, and let the port dry naturally rather than forcing a connection. Open your battery settings and confirm fast charging. And super fast charging are actually switched on. Check whether battery protection's maximum or adaptive mode is capping your charge at 80% on purpose. Keep your phone cool while it charges, and avoid gaming or heavy use during a charge if speed matters. Install any pending software updates, since Samsung regularly ships targeted charging fixes. Close background apps before you plug in, and always plug directly into a wall outlet rather than a laptop or car USB port when speed counts. Run a battery health diagnostic through the Samsung Members app before assuming the worst. And if absolutely nothing works, back up everything, consider a factory reset. And if that still doesn't solve it, let a professional take a look rather than risking further damage on your own. Fast charging issues feel alarming the first time you notice them, mostly because they show up suddenly and seem to come from nowhere. But almost every case traces back to something simple, fixable, and completely within your control, whether that's a worn-out cable, a setting you didn't know existed, or a battery quietly protecting itself the way it was designed to. Work through these steps in order. Be patient with the process. And in most cases, you'll have that fast, reliable charge back well before you reach the end of this list. If this guide helped you pin down exactly what was going wrong with your Samsung device, that's exactly what it was built for.